So, as has just been introduced, I've been working with Python for a long time. I started using Python in '99, and I've built multiple websites over the years with multiple frameworks on Python. I've also been very interested in the way communities come together and form. I used to organize Barcamp Bangalore starting from about 2006, and since then I've started running conferences professionally. I also, write a lot of open source. I've been talking about open source for a long time. And for the last 1 year, I've been very interested in net neutrality and have been part of the Save the Internet campaign. I think it's a special time to be out here at JNU because of what's been happening over the past month in this place. And I'm going to try to convince you that Python, net neutrality, and politics are related to each other. So now this is not going to work if I give a lecture, so it's going to be interactive. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'd expect you to respond. And unless there are audience mics going around, I can't hear you guys in the back, so I would request you to please come forward. Everyone move at least one row forward. There's an entire row empty out here, so please come forward. So what I said, if you miss something important, please interrupt and ask. All right? So let's start with something fundamental. So what am I standing on out here? What is the surface called? It's called a platform, right? What does the word platform mean? It's a term that is used in multiple contexts. So can you people give me a few meanings of the word platform? An endpoint. Okay. Leave the complexity to the user. Okay. Somebody said something. Yeah, platform being a standing ground from which people jump. Okay.
The one you're standing on.
The standing?
The one you're standing on is a platform.
Yeah, the one I'm standing on is a platform. So I'm standing on a surface that's called a platform. There's also the railway platform, which is where you get on a train. Yeah?
The place where you start.
The place where you start. I'm sorry? An enabler.
The place that directs you.
Place that directs you. Where does it direct you to?
In the sense of a train.
A train, okay. Yeah. Any other meanings of the word platform?
Perform. Where you can perform.
Where you can perform?
So base.
A base. Okay. Does anyone know where the word platform comes from? What does it mean? So as it turns out, it's a French term, and it means plate form. Something in the shape of a plate. Okay? A plate essentially meaning flat ground. Okay? So the original etymology of the term comes from a physical definition of a blank surface on which something can happen. And as you would expect, the most useful context for a blank surface is also if it's raised in some manner. So it's raised in this case so that I'm slightly above the audience, so you can see me. Okay? In a railway station, it is raised a little bit so that you can get on the train without falling under it. So the word platform essentially has its origins in this architectural definition, that it's some kind of a surface. Once you start from there, the next thing that happens is, if you look at what's going on out here, I'm standing on a surface that's somewhat raised, and you're here to listen to me. Okay? So what's happened here is that you've gone from this architectural sense of platform to a slightly metaphorical sense, where it's about saying that I have been given a place to stand and speak. Okay? So this conference has afforded me a platform. It's provided me a platform on which to speak. Okay? And now it's no longer about a physical surface. It's about this idea that I'm here to speak and you're here to listen. Okay? So this is the second definition of the word platform. The third definition is what I'm trying to do out here. Remember, I just said I'm going to try to convince you that Python, politics, and net neutrality are related topics. Okay? I just made a statement saying I'm going to attempt to convince you, and some people laughed because it sounds like something that doesn't make sense, and it's completely understandable. It wouldn't have made sense until I get to the point of what I'm trying to say. But this, interestingly, is the definition of politics. If you guys have Wi-Fi right now, please go Google the term politics, look up the Wikipedia definition. Um, Politics is the practice and theory of influencing people, influencing other people. So what it essentially means as the term is this idea that I'm going to attempt to influence your thought process and convince you to believe what I'm going to say is what politics actually is. Okay? And now look at what's happened. I'm standing on a physical surface that's a raised platform. This is the architectural definition of platform. It essentially has a metaphorical meaning in that, a figurative meaning, sorry, in that the conference has given me a platform on which to speak. Okay? From there, I've taken it to saying the purpose of my speech is to convince you of something and make you believe what I believe. And this is now a political statement. Okay? And once you get from here, you get to something else that is seemingly unrelated, which is computer platforms. Okay? What's a computer platform? Anyone? In the word computer, in computer science, what does the word platform mean? A base of some sort.
That provides an environment to execute several kind of software.
Okay, so it provides an environment in which to execute several kinds of software. So would you say your operating system is a platform? Okay. Is your operating system political speech?
It can be. It can be.
So in fact it is. Okay? And that's the thing I'm going to try explaining to you now. So why is it political speech? But let's make sure we understand. 4 senses of the term platform: architectural, figurative, political, and computers. Right? So now why would you say a computer platform is some form of politics? So let's start with this. We are here running a Python conference. Have you guys heard of the Ruby language? Yes. Okay. Who here programs in Ruby? Okay, can you tell me whether Python or Ruby is a better language? If you have an opinion on it, please explain why. No one willing to speak for Ruby? Okay. You're not going to get trashed, so it's all right.
We don't have boilerplates in Ruby.
You don't have boilerplates in Ruby. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you repeat that?
Boilerplates code बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं लिखने पड़ते हैं.
So you're saying that it's easier to write. Ruby is more concise. You write lesser lines of code to get what you need to get done, right? Yeah. So something else. So
That's 100% of OOPS concept.
100% OOPS concept. Okay. Anything else?
Python
Anyone
also-
speaking in favor of Ruby?
Well, in favor of Ruby.
Yeah.
You-
Or in favor of Python? Go ahead.
I think it's a great glue language to bind things.
Which Python is?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so 2 statements that I just made are essentially opinions. You think it's a great glue language to bind stuff. Okay. What is the other one? So it's concise, which you disagree with, and saying that you can also find Python concise. Now, here's the thing. Okay, these are opinions. And the opinions coming from whatever knowledge you have. If I went to a Ruby conference and asked this question, everybody's going to give me fantastic reasons for why Ruby is a better language than Python. Okay. Can you objectively compare and say one of these two is a better language? Now you can objectively compare language features. In Ruby, for instance, you have anonymous functions. In Python, you do not. Therefore, you can say Ruby has feature, Python does not have feature. Therefore, if it's a feature comparison, Ruby is better. Something else, you say Python is better. Now you can do objective comparisons of things like features. You can't do an objective comparison and arrive at a conclusion that it is better. Okay. Better simply comes out to saying, for my purposes, it is better. All right. So this kind of gives you this interesting problem and saying, how do you then say that I have decided Python is the choice I'm going to go with and not Ruby? Okay? However, you people decided that you're more interested in Python as a language than Ruby as a language, and therefore have come to a Python conference. Now, as it turns out, there is no proper answer to this. Okay? It simply comes down to saying how did you get inducted into going down a certain path. When you work with the language has a syntax. The syntax determines what you can do with it. On top of the syntax, you write software. Then you distribute your software to other people to use. So you create libraries. And when you come down to actually writing any software, you're writing software on top of the libraries which are on top of the language. Most of the time, if you're doing an advanced project, you're not going to write completely from scratch, not importing anything from any existing software. Most of the time, you will be importing somebody else's source code. So if you're, for instance, building a web app in Python, you're going to use Django or Flask or Pyramid or something. You're not going to write a web server from scratch. Same thing in Ruby, you're going to use Rails, you're going to use Active Record, you're going to use whatever else they provide. You go to JavaScript, you're going to use Node.js, something else. So you always depend on something else beneath you. Now, what is this something else beneath you? That's architecture, right? That's a physical structure of some sort that exists, and you are working on top of this structure. But how did everybody in this chain decide that they figured that they will build a library for Python and not for Ruby because they think Python is a better language? Given that we just determined that you can't make an objective statement that one language is better than the other, and you have essentially built software, that is the foundation on which you will build other software. What have you got here? You've got opinions. People saying, I think this is a better approach, and therefore I will build software along this approach. What's an opinion? A form of political speech, saying that I think this is the way to do things, so please come with me. What is software? It's essentially an architectural thing, that it is a structure on which you build other stuff. Now, what have you got here? You've got this uncomfortable conclusion that your architecture is your politics. Does this make sense, or do you disagree here? Architecture is politics. So, I see everybody is silent. So either you're completely confused, or you disagree and you don't want to say, or you're so pleased that you're hoping somebody else will celebrate on your behalf, whatever. So, opinions. I just made a statement. Architecture is politics. Agree? Disagree?
Just comments, right?
Yeah. So disagree. Why?
Because architecture is, I would say, creating a good architecture is almost an art.
It's an art, exactly. But
Actually, yes, now I agree.
But art itself is a sort of politics, right?
All art is political. I believe that. So,
okay. So this is a statement made by Mitch Kapor, who's the guy who created Lotus 123, which, as you may remember, was what inspired Microsoft Excel. Lotus 123 was sort of the application that kickstarted the PC revolution back in the 80s. That people bought computers to be able to use Lotus 123 on it. So clearly, this was a man who had a fairly significant influence on the industry as it exists today. And a few years ago, he made a statement saying architecture is politics and politics is architecture. And I had to look at it and say, what? That made no sense whatsoever to me at that point. But the more I've thought about it, the more I realized that in fact he's right. That you decide to build things on the basis of belief, and what you have built is a foundation for the next person to build things. And eventually you've got two different structures that have been built. Python versus Ruby, the Python community and the Python language ecosystem and the libraries, and the Ruby community, the Ruby language ecosystem and the libraries, which you can't have proper objective comparisons to say this was better than that. But you can make objective comparisons of this feature is here and is not over there. Okay? So this is what you got. Okay? Architecture is politics, politics is architecture, and go ahead.
Well, in politics, you said that you convince others for your opinions.
Yes.
And architecture, you compare to opinions. But there is a gap here. So in politics, you are convincing others of your opinions. In architecture,
you're building
because of
something.
Opinions, you're building because you're not convincing others.
You're not convincing others,
So
but
there's a gap.
you're convincing others to build on top of what you're built.
So I might decide okay, this is my opinion, I will build according to it. I might not necessarily tell others to build according to that. I
Yeah.
might be a sole developer, I might be, so my team decides to build on that.
Alright.
But politics necessarily contains the statement that convincing others.
Okay, so you build something. What's the point of it? What do you do with it?
I'm using it, I'm trying to use it. So I build a web app and
Yeah.
I provide it as a service, but I'm not necessarily saying this, use this service to build something else or whatever.
Okay,
I
so-
provide a service.
So it becomes easier when you think of it. For the moment, let's assume that you're building something that's a foundation for the next person to build on. Okay? Yes, the reason I'm saying this is that everything is a foundation eventually. Okay? So let's not talk about what happens in the future. Let's talk about what happened in the immediate past, where you built on top of something. That person may not necessarily have imagined you'll build on top of it. Okay? Because eventually everything becomes a foundation for the next thing. Okay? And in general, it takes a bit of a while to realize when you have suddenly become the foundation for the next thing to happen. I know, for instance, that there are people posting their resumes online saying they're an expert on how to use my website. Okay? I was shocked when I discovered this. It happens. Okay? So eventually everything becomes foundation for the next layer. So, but we accept now that essentially when I build something based on my opinion of how something should be done, the next person building on top of it is essentially subject to my opinion. That I have now decided how they will operate. Okay? If my website says this is how you will behave on my website because these are the features available, this person putting it on the resume saying I'm expert on using this website is essentially behaving in a manner that I have decided is how they're allowed to behave. Even though I did not imagine myself forcing my choices on this person, but for them, this is their career. They're getting jobs on the basis of the fact that they know how to use my job board. So, what kind of political speech do you get if you say something like Python? Now, Python has choices in the language that are essentially choices. For instance, the language's choice of saying you must use indentation to define a block of code is not a technical requirement coming from somewhere below. It was the creator's choice, because you can have programming languages that don't require indentation. So what you had here is the creator of the language having decided that he does not like code that is not properly indented, so he's going to make it a mandatory requirement in the language. Okay? That was a political choice. That someone forcing their opinion on everybody else saying, if you don't like this, don't use this language. As it turns out, enough people liked it that they're using the language, sometimes even reluctantly, because your company decided to use the language and you've been forced to code in Python, you don't like it, you hate indentation, you'll complain on forums all the time and say, I do this for a job, but I don't like this. This happens in PHP all the time because it turns out that there's just a lot more established as a language. It happens with Java all the time, and soon it'll happen with Python because we have suddenly hit this point where Python is now as popular as PHP is in India. Yeah? And because I run a job board, I look at what people are hiring for, and Python just went above PHP in number of jobs available in this country. So that's a milestone, and that essentially means you will now get language haters who use it even though they hate it. Yeah? And hate is politics again. You disagree with this, but you have no choice but to be subject to this reject. So, now that you got this idea, architecture is politics, and architecture is the foundation for what you build on top. What sort of foundations should you be building, can you be building, and where does something like net neutrality come into this? Okay? So, I'm going to take a small break here and ask people, say, what do you know of net neutrality? You've seen what's happened with Save the Internet, you've seen the All India Bakshod video. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has seen the video by now. There have been 3 videos, there's a 4th one coming out soon. Early warning alert. And you have seen Facebook's ads. They plastered the country with ads all of December. So clearly you know something has been going on. But what was it about? Was it about free basics? Was it about something larger? So anyone here? Does nobody know anything about what happened with net neutrality? Come on, you guys need to speak up a bit more. Yes?
It was to give some apps for the free, so you don't have to pay.
Yeah, so it was about giving some apps for free so you don't have to pay.
Companies like Facebook and others wanted to provide some basic apps for free to influence larger audience. Like if I have free basic app, suppose I have Facebook, then
Yeah.
I will use it. I mean, if it's free, then more people will download that app and will try to use it.
Okay.
So Facebook people will be able to influence larger population with
On this, yeah.
I think it was a conflict of interest for the public utility kind of a practice that exists in community versus a private company's interest for really exercising their opinion.
Right. So, anybody is able to connect this yet and say what does this have to do with programming languages?
Posting their choice.
Forcing a choice. Yes, but everybody forces choice. That's the point of politics. If you do it well, nobody thinks of it as force. So,
Exploiting their need.
yeah. So now, so this is a tricky connection. Okay. On the one hand, we're talking about how architecture is politics and how you build up stuff. On the other hand, we're talking about Facebook having done something that we now recognize as bad. Although there are people who still think that there was nothing wrong with it, but that's fine. That's political opinion again. Where do they connect? So you had something else in back.
It's as you said, architectural decision of how a certain problem is going to be solved.
Yeah.
So the problem here that we were talking about ultimately is how do we provide internet to the next billion? Now, how do you architecture? So there is an opinion that Facebook had that this is probably how that architecture, that solution should be.
Yeah.
And there is this alternate voice that says why that architecture might. So it connects the whole idea of your platform with architecture of solutions.
Right.
That ultimately architecture is opinion, and you have to convince about those architectures to people.
Okay, so that's coming very close to the point I need to make, that this is about the architecture of how to improve internet access for everyone. And Facebook had a certain idea that this technical solution is the way to solve it. Other people had other ideas, saying that that technical solution will cause more problems, it won't solve the problem, and so forth. So now where do we connect this? Okay, so let's go back to the platform. We agree platform is both architecture and politics, especially in computers. You know that anything you build in software is the foundation for the next person to build, and it's also an opinion expressed by the person who built this, and their opinion carries forward to the next person operating on this. Okay? Now, let's talk about Python again. Python is a language created by Guido van Rossum, sitting somewhere in Europe in the early 90s. At any point, did he imagine that there would be a PyDelhi happening in 2016 when he built Python? Obviously not. He had no idea what you do with it. So, when you build a language, one of the things that you design for is that the things you can do with this language are far beyond the imagination of the language's creator. This is the one fundamental aspect of language. Whether you think Python is better than Ruby or Ruby is better than Python, ultimately the success of a language comes from the fact that it has generative value. That you defined some kind of platform saying you are allowed to write a certain syntax, and you can write software in a certain way. Some things are not allowed, like Python does not allow anonymous functions. They have decided that this was a political choice. Python requires indentation, that was a political choice. But Python also gives you enough flexibility to do a whole bunch of things with it that the creator of the language never imagined would ever be possible. Okay? The fact that we just had this example this morning, that Python was a significant tool used in the setup that discovered gravitational waves. That most certainly was never imagined by Guido van Rossum when he created a language. He never imagined that he was creating a language that would eventually be used to discover gravitational waves. I think it's a fairly fair statement to make. Okay? So, when you build a platform, one of the key aspects of good architecture is, are you building for the ability to create things that are beyond your imagination? And that you should not even be bothered to think about and say, can it potentially be used for something like this? What you're doing is creating building blocks. Okay? Put these blocks together, go build what you want with it, fantastic things will emerge. Okay? On the other hand, there are times when you create a platform for the explicit intent of preventing something from happening on top of it. Yeah. And that also has great outcomes. So, let's look at the other notion of platform. It's
Can you give an example of something?
absolutely, that's what's coming up next. Okay. So, You people have used Amazon to buy stuff, or Flipkart. What are these things? They're also platforms. The word platform is used very commonly with them, or more appropriately, the word marketplace is used. Okay. But marketplaces are also considered platforms in the sense that it is a platform on which a buyer and a seller can meet. There is a seller who's selling stuff on the platform, there's a buyer who's buying stuff on the platform. Okay. Now this happens to be a particular kind of platform design called a two-sided marketplace. That you have two different kinds of complementary entities who will meet on this platform. When you write software, you as a producer of software are producing it for someone who's consuming the software. Okay. So what happens here is that a software platform is a place for a producer and a consumer to meet, and this happens to be the software industry. That when you write for a certain operating system, let's say that you're writing an Android app, or you're writing an iOS app, or you're writing a Windows app or a Linux app. Linux or Windows or Android or iOS is a platform on which you as a producer of software are making software and selling it to a consumer. When you do something of this sort, if everybody pirates your software, you don't make any money. Okay? So you want some aspect of this design to prevent piracy from happening. Okay? And there are various ways to do this. You can also take the philosophy that you do not care about piracy, and that's why you have open source. So open source is a certain approach to saying, I don't care about this piracy problem. Closed source is an approach to saying, I do care about this piracy problem. I do care about creating a symbiotic relationship where there's a seller and there's a buyer, and that you will not violate these roles. Okay? And iOS, for instance, has become phenomenally successful because they're very good at controlling App Store piracy. Okay? When you go to Amazon and buy stuff, there's a clear relationship between you, the buyer, and the seller. You have, for instance, purchase protection. If you bought something, it is not good, Amazon will guarantee that they will fix it for you, that they will replace the product, they offer you guarantees and so forth. And the seller takes the risk. If you use Uber or Ola to book an app, what you got there is a relationship between a driver and a rider. And the platform ensures that it's a very clear, unambiguous relationship between driver and rider. At no point will your Uber driver say, please drive the car, I'm feeling sleepy. Okay? That's not supposed to happen. Uber ensures that some behaviors do not happen, role reversal never happens. Okay? So when you design a platform to have this limitation saying you are given a certain role, you will not perform outside this role, then they create a situation where you allow a lot of people to be able to use this platform and build something fantastically large. And in fact, the most successful company in this space has been Microsoft. Okay? That while as open source enthusiasts, we consider Microsoft as some kind of enemy and say that you guys created closed source software and whatnot, the fact is that by creating this two-sided marketplace on a PC, where some people produce software and some people consume software, they enable the entire industry to exist. Okay? Of course we disagree with them. Of course we say open source is better. But both sides can exist. Right? There is a certain notion of platform which says, I do not care what fantastic things you do on top of what I provide you. I'm not imposing limitations, please go build, and eventually something incredible will emerge. On the other hand, you have this slightly sales-driven approach which says, you have a role to perform, you're either a buyer or a seller. There are boundaries within which you can operate, and as long as you stay within these boundaries, we will make this better for everyone. And this generally works very well from a consumer standpoint, because sometimes you just want to say, I'm giving some money, I want my problem solved. I don't want to think about all these different complications that emerge and so forth. So, are we clear now? There is the open platform where anything can be done, and there is the marketplace where there is a clear relationship between two parties. Fair enough? Okay. And now, where does a marketplace exist? If Uber wants to, do this taxi marketplace where there's a driver and a rider, it's an app on your phone. So the platform for Uber is your phone's operating system. If you use Android, what is your operating system? It's Android. What's it running on? Linux. What is Linux? An open platform. Linux represents an open platform that allowed Android to exist. Android is also an open platform, but Android is a platform on which the App Store exists, the Google Play Store exists, and Google's Play Store is the closed marketplace platform on which Uber puts out an app that you can download. Uber then becomes the closed platform on which there's a driver and a rider. You see this? That you generally do either open or closed, and both of them are very beneficial if they're done right. So what happened here is, now we come back to free basics. Facebook proposing this idea that the open internet is not reaching the people it's supposed to reach, so let's do a closed internet and take this app store model of saying that there is a producer of a website and there is a consumer of a website, and maybe now we will get more people to use the internet. See? So this essentially was what was being proposed here, and this is not just Facebook. The entire net neutrality argument is various forms of this exact same thing, that the internet is an open platform on which anybody can do anything they want. But because it's an open platform, it is not well defined, and therefore there's always going to be some confusion about how to do this, especially for poor people who can't afford the initial cost of coming online. So you provide a simpler version in which a very limited scope is available and a very limited behavior is allowed, and do various things on this. And this is the free basics idea. And so this comes down to now saying that if you want to oppose free basics, what are you opposing it for? You're opposing it politically, obviously. So when you fight net neutrality, this is when you ask for net neutrality and fight Facebook, this is happening on a political arena. The ultimate decision-making authority in this case was the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is a political body. That it's appointed by politicians. It's not a bunch of programmers sitting there saying that free basics is technically incorrect. It is a bunch of political appointees saying we think this is the wrong way to do things, it will cause consequences elsewhere. And what typically happens in a discussion of this sort is people then come back with saying, but technically free basics is well thought out, technically the technical requirements imposed are not a problem, they are what you would do anyway to build a lightweight website, so what is the problem with this? But in this case, you say, but this is not the technology problem here. This is now a political problem, because it's coming down to saying you're dealing with the larger architecture of open versus closed, and saying the internet as an open platform allows a closed platform to exist on top of it, but it's not itself a closed platform. And if you are essentially saying that because the open platform is not expanding fast enough, let's replace it with a closed platform, that is a problem, because now you're changing the fundamental nature of this architecture. And this is essentially what TRAI accepted. So if you look at the ruling, all it says is you go to whatever closed stuff you want on top of the open platform, but you can't make the open platform itself a closed platform. So this is roughly what I had to say, and I hope I got you guys thinking now about how you design software. And when you make software, you're always building for somebody else who will build on top of it. And what is the basis on which you're building? Are you building an open platform on which people can do things that you never imagined possible? Or are you building something closed, which is also good? There are lots of great things you can do by building a closed behavior platform. And mind you, open source does not necessarily mean open platform. You can have an open source closed platform. Because closed in this case is limited behavior. So if you build a website, it is closed. It has a very clear definition of what you can do with it. You can't go to a website and start programming. Your website is not a programming language. Your website simply says there are a bunch of links you can follow here, there's some form you can fill out, and that's essentially all you can do on the website. So you can build stuff with a very limited interaction model and build something fantastic. You can build an open platform which provides some building blocks on which somebody else will build something you never imagined. Both of them are completely understandable and both of them are completely viable. But it helps not confuse one with the other and know when you're doing what, when you're doing this, when you're doing that. And finally, for someone who's still wondering when I'm going to mention BJP or Congress or some other aspect of politics, part of what I think should be clear here is, if you go back to the definition of politics as being this practice of influencing other people, there's going to be a point at which you don't need to exert influence anymore because everybody believes it. At which point it stops being political. It just becomes part of the background. If you want a purely political example, let's look at universal franchise. The idea that anybody over a certain age is allowed to vote in this country. Now, universal franchise is something that nobody debates. There is no political party right now claiming that women should not be allowed to vote. Is there? It's a very stupid thing to do. You would never imagine going back to a time when women were not allowed to vote, but in fact it existed less than 100 years ago. That less than 100 years ago, pretty much nowhere in the world were women allowed to vote. And that just sounds like the dark ages, but it was in fact very recently. And one of the most recent countries to change was Switzerland in 1975. Until 1975, they did not allow women to vote in that country. There are still places where that's not allowed. Saudi Arabia this year finally allowed women to stand for elections, which sounds ridiculous anywhere else in the world. But the thing is, in India, you would not consider some scenario like this because essentially it's become universal. That everybody believes in a certain thing, which used to be hotly contested politics not very long ago. Okay? And this is what happens a lot in computer programming. That nobody thinks of Python as being a political entity because it existed longer than you've been programming. Yeah? I don't think there's anybody in this room who's been programming longer than the Python language existed. Has there been? Because it's a language coming dating from over 1981. Has anybody here been programming since before 91? Yeah. Right. So have I. So there are a few of us who remember a time when a language was introduced new and looked at it and said, I don't like this, why indentation? You look at this with Node.js today and say this callback thing is nonsense. This is a bad way to design programming languages. So you apply this political filter to something that came after your time. You do not apply this to something that came before your time. Because now it's so well established that it is part of the background noise, that this is just the foundation that you're building on. And this is what happens a lot, that politics of today is architecture of tomorrow. You stop noticing it after a while. But when you build today, your architecture of today is politics of tomorrow. And this is something you need to keep in mind when you build because it affects what happens with your software afterwards. Okay. So I want to leave you with that. If there's any questions at this point, take it.
So you talked about, the comparison was pretty nice when it comes to how internet should be an open platform.
Yeah.
And on top of it, you can create closed platforms, which is what price ruling is.
Yeah.
But we've seen this before in some sense, right? That that possibility existed even in case of operating systems. But an operating system with a marketing machinery was able to convince, money is a political tool as well, in a sense, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So it used that tool to convince people of using a certain, doing things in a certain way.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening with internet as well in future? That these closed internet...
Yes, and this is essentially what the net neutrality fight has been for the last 10 years. So it's not new. It's only come to India in the last 1.5 years. But it's been raging since the 90s in the US. Okay? And in fact, the definition of the term net neutrality also dates back to 2003. At which point it was used to point out that this was happening and it needed some understanding of what was going on. It started the same way out there. The cable companies became the first ISPs, just like it happened in India, that the broadband used to come from the same fellows who gave you TV. And the original fight that happened in the US was the fact that if you watch video on the internet versus watch TV, even though they're coming on the same pipe, they're charged at different rates. If you're watching video on the internet, you're paying per byte. If you're watching TV coming on the same cable, you're paying a monthly flat rate. See? And so one of the original net neutrality arguments was saying that this is not the cost of the pipe anymore. This is an arbitrary choice made by this provider saying my service for free, internet you're paying for. I'm claiming to charge you for the cost of providing a service, but clearly I'm not. Why else would one thing be so much cheaper than the other? Unless you've actually hidden the cost and you're just doing it somewhere else. So the original net neutrality argument started there, saying that the way it's being represented is not what it actually is. And the original way to understand this is that if it's all coming on the same pipe, then all bits must be treated equally. Okay? And this, unfortunately, sounds a bit like a human rights argument, like all people are equal, all bits are equal. The problem with this is that all bits are not equal. A ping packet, an ICMP packet, is not the same as a TCP packet. A TCP packet and a UDP packet are different. A TCP packet has guaranteed delivery, UDP packet does not have guaranteed delivery. So clearly they're not different, they're not the same at the network level. So what's happened with net neutrality is, starting from this idea that no matter what you consume on your home internet connection, it should be treated as the same as anything else you consume. Your provider has no business saying one is cheap, one is not cheap. Went on to saying all bits are equal, caused a lot of network engineers to get upset saying this is nonsense, the bits are not equal. Eventually has been recognized as saying what is the actual problem? The actual problem is not the bits, the actual problem is competition. That when your internet provider says I will offer one service cheaper than the other service, they're essentially discriminating and saying I am subsidizing one service and influencing your choice by saying this is cheaper because I said so. And that is more expensive because I'm collecting tax here. So the reframing from equality to competition is what's taken some time, and that's essentially why it's also a very muddled argument. I think finally we have now come to the point, at least in India, if you look at the TRAI ruling, it's very clearly about competition. They don't even subscribe to this all bits are equal or all packets are equal philosophy at all. They're clearly after it saying that we think it's a competition issue and that this is not something you can resolve after some damage happens. So you don't go to the Competition Commission of India and say Facebook is behaving badly. This is something as important because it's at the architecture level, that you're setting an architecture choice here and saying I will make something free, I will meter something, I will not meter something. Stop it from happening and say one layer below the political choice, say you're not allowed to build such architecture.
No, but what about they can potentially have those sub-networks where, like take for example, Airtel has this app Wink Music, and that's supposed to be, I have not seen that they have changed anything about their plans.
Yeah.
So in certain plans, that particular app,
that's illegal now.
That particular app is.
Yeah, so that's now illegal.
How they.
TRAI says 50,000 rupee per day fine if you offer the service. So there is some confusion still about the TRAI ruling, the regulation. Some people are saying that there is a closed network loophole, but I think they're actually very clear about this. If you're doing anything that communicates with the internet, it's not a closed network. Right? So if you're providing music, what data center is this music coming from? If this data center is not on the internet, you do your major private LAN at your own cost, good luck. Nobody's going to do that. It has to be in some data center. Your data center cannot be not connected to the internet. Okay? And if it's connected to the internet, then it's not a closed network. So it's very cleverly defined, because everybody thinks it's a loophole, but there is no practical way to use this loophole. They run on the internet, so it's fine.
One last question.
Thank you. I was wondering if you can comment on how do you reconcile content distribution networks with net neutrality?
There's no problem at all.
How so?
So you should talk to an expert on CDNs for this. Several CDN experts have confirmed that they do not see any problem whatsoever between CDNs and net neutrality. Mostly because if you're co-locating a CDN in a data center, then there is no problem over there. If you're putting in a pipe, CDN is not an exclusive pathway, unlike what happens with the consumer internet connection. On a consumer connection, your ISP is your exclusive pathway to the internet. On a CDN, they're not exclusive, and therefore the same exclusivity rules don't apply. So, which means that the condition of saying are you discriminating does not apply because it's not an exclusive path. Right. Thank you guys. I hope you have a good day ahead. There seems to be a bunch of very interesting workshops ahead, and hopefully you'll think about your architecture when you sit in these things and think about what you're building with it. All right? So, have a good day.
Thank you, Kiran. Thanks a lot for such an inspiring keynote. Before we move on in our day, I have just two quick announcements. One, reiterating on the Wi-Fi issue, you can connect to any of the JNU access points, the JNU Wi-Fi and JNU Wi-Fi v2. The username that they'll ask you for is PyDelhi and the password is PyDelhi rocks. Even if you don't believe the PyDelhi rocks, just enter it. The password is the same. Yeah, I am forcing my opinion here. If you want to access the internet. Second most important thing is that this event has been made possible because of the support we got from our sponsors. So do go, interact with them, show your support, show interest. And the most important thing is don't just sit here and attend the lectures. Yeah, you can attend lectures in colleges. If you're out of colleges, go and go again. If that is what you're here for. You're here for social interaction, mingle with yourself, collaborate, network. That is the prime agenda of bringing you all together here. So let's have a good time.
It's by Mr. Professor Kannan, and I'm not sure how many of you know him or have read about him, but he's the pioneer. If you have visited the Spoken Tutorial website, and it's an IIT Bombay initiative. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Kannan, and let's have this awesome workshop.
Thing. So this is on the work that we have done in promoting open source software. That's what I'm going to talk about. Low-cost laptop that we have come up with. Band in the bottom. Our driver issue is not completely solved, but it is a complete laptop. It's a complete laptop, 7,500 rupees, Linux based. We are going to keep it in the stall later, our FOSSEE stall. And those of you who are interested can come and connect through that. You notice what software have I used to create this? Can anybody guess? Beamer. Beamer, yeah. So, in fact, I have this here. There it is, Emacs. So I have Emacs running on this, and as a matter of fact, I just did a, and I get the output in Beamer. Okay, all in this 7,500 rupee laptop. Let it finish compiling, then we can actually take it up. There won't be any difference because I didn't make any changes to this file. Okay. Okay, it has refreshed. It says output written on pydelhi.pdf. So I'm going to give, this is, quite a bit of it is going to be demo. That's the reason why I wanted to connect to internet. So I'm going to cover 3 different topics. One is the project that we have been running for the last 5 years, IT Literacy Drive through spoken tutorials. Why we want to do this, what all have we done, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. Second one, FOSSEE projects by FOSSEE. There is an extra F. Okay. So I seem to have made a mistake. Any case, okay. It is not able to go to the full screen because it is still compiling. But let's go to the next slide in the meantime. What is the motivation for all the work that we are doing, right? Okay, in fact, it seems to have, you can see that it is fixed now. See that? So, what is the, why did we start this IT training? It's because 50% of our population is below 25 years, 2/3 are below 35 years. But then education quality, finding good teachers, providing jobs, these are the biggest problems. We do have lots of people, but we also don't have, we are not able to teach them all well, so there is a problem. So what is the approach to problem solution? One second. Okay, I think I didn't, I made one more mistake here. They can do very well anywhere in the world, okay? I'm saying when I say 10%, 10% in a village, in a town, in a big city, wherever it may be, wherever the school or college may be. But unfortunately they are stuck there, okay? They could have done anywhere in the world, could have done well anywhere in the world, but they are in a small village. Maybe economical reasons, maybe family issues, and they don't have resources, they are stuck, okay? Next, the question is, who are they? Are they the toppers? How do we find out who they are? So my contention is they are not necessarily the toppers, because we know many people, at least some examples. Okay. How do we find these 10% of the people? If only we know who they are, because they are very good, and we empower them, they are going to be performing well wherever they go. They are the people who are going to be the great scientists, innovators, and so on and so forth. And they are the people who are going to take us to the next century. They are going to make us the developed country. Okay? But how we don't know who they are. So, when we started this project, our government took the stand that let us empower everybody in the country. Because we don't know who they are. If we know who they are, we can empower them, but we don't know who they are. They are not necessarily the highest scoring people. So if only we make all these things available to everybody, then it will go to that 10%. And they will be empowered, they will do well, and our country will go. So this is the idea. It could be 10%, it could be 15%, 20%, whatever that number is, right? So that's why our project started. We said that we must come with a method to spread, to start with IT literacy, that we will use open source software for that. I'm going to explain some of the reasons for that, some of the decisions that we made. Okay? So we said that I'm going to describe this, our approach, as a question and answer, problem statement and our solution. Problem statement, most students in India do not have access to good teachers. Okay? So what do? We said we should train students by themselves. If the students can learn by themselves, if we can come up with a methodology that will allow the students by themselves, the fact that they don't have access to good teachers will not be a problem. So we said, make the content suitable for self-learning so that they can learn by themselves. Then we said, the content should be suitable for self-learning. How do we guarantee this? So we thought that we could do this for IT training. In the area of IT training, we could do this. How do we do this? Like movies have script, we said our video tutorials that we will create would also have a script. Right? Write a script first and ask the video creator to speak from the script. Now, before recording it, ask a novice, ask a beginner to go through the script and certify that they can redo everything. Our tutorials do not have too much theory. They only say do this, type this, drag this, click this, so on and so forth. And you would have written this program does this. Okay, you call this function, it does this. So it is all illustrated by making the students do something. So if a novice can do it, a beginner can do it, most likely it is suitable for self-learning. Is that clear? Write the script, subject it through novice check. Normally, what we say is, oh, you don't know this, such a simple thing? What a stupid question. Okay? Here we said, look, we want to make this available to the whole country, especially to the bottom of the pyramid, so it should be suitable for the beginners. So that's why we made beginners very important component of our work. The next thing is, the students are going to learn on their own, right? So the learning pedagogy should be effective, so that they can learn effectively. We have given material, but they should also know how to use it. So for this, we came up with this method called side-by-side learning. What is a side-by-side learning? Our tendency nowadays is to maximize every screen. We tell them don't maximize the screen. There are two things in this training. One is the video itself, because the video says what to do. Keep it on half the screen. In the other half of the screen, open the software. For example, if it says, in this case I have opened Scilab here. This is that software, whereas this is the video. And it could be word processing video. In that case, you open the word processing software. Okay? So, what is the method? It's very easy. Play the video, listen to one command, pause it. Try it out on the software. If it works, go to the next line. If not, rewind the video, listen to it again, try it. It will always work because it is created for self-learning. Because it is created for self-learning, everybody will be able to reproduce every step. Only reason why it may not work is they did not do it properly. So rewind, listen to it again and do it, it will always work. So it's a very simple thing. Remember, this is possible only if the software is free, freely available to the student, and the video also is available free of cost to the students, so that everybody can download it legally and use it. Of course, our videos are available free of cost on our website. Okay? Let me see if I can show. I have already connected our website. It's here. Okay. So let me take LibreOffice Writer, English. Okay, it gives a playlist. So these are, so let me take this typing, text and basic formatting. Okay. So while it is coming, we can go to the next one. The next problem is lack of computers. Okay, can you see? I have the video, I have the slide here. Lack of computers is another problem for our country. Oh, here it is. Let's come. Let's see if I can play that. Okay, just one second.